Mama who bore me, Mama who gave me no way to handle things, who made me so sad. We're back.
Welcome back. Hope you enjoyed that little musical intro.
Yes. You never know what we're going to be singing here on Small Town Snarks.
I know. I think now that we've warmed up and we dipped our toes into the, I don't know, podcasting water. What am I trying to say?
Podcasting water.
Podcasting water, yeah. Now that we're comfortable.
Yeah. Oh, yes. Okay.
I think you'll hear a lot more musical
for vocal stylings.
Intros from us, because every time you call me, you start out with a great song, unless you're upset, and then sometimes you'll just be like, "Hey." But usually it's Oklahoma.
I don't know why it's Oklahoma. Not even the biggest fan of that musical.
I know, we gotta switch it up.
Yeah, I'll get right on that.
Okay.
Fortunately, the show we're talking about, or continuing to talk about today, is has a lot of catchy tunes.
Spring and summer. Every other day.
Yes, 100%.
Here we go.
Well, let's jump back into where we were at. We were talking about the rehearsal process.
Sure were.
Yeah.
We're getting into the
thick of things.
The steamy tea of this.
Yeah.
Of this production. Are you buckled in?
I'm not going anywhere. I'll be right here.
Experience this together.
Yeah. One of my favorite memories and things that I still quote to this day from this rehearsal process. A couple weeks before we went into tech, I'll never forget you and I blocking. I think we were doing run-throughs at this point in time. And one of our cast members looked at us and just we're in the middle of this rehearsal process. We're like really focused on things, and I think they had taken a moment. They were like talking amongst themselves, and we're like trying to figure something out. And they say to us, "When is opening night?" And I can still feel when I say those words out loud, that feeling that I had when it was asked at that moment in time, because in my mind, I'm like, we open in a couple of weeks. I don't know.
Yeah, we were two months in at this point.
That point, yeah.
And I remember looking at you.
Mm-hmm.
I turned away from this person. I looked at you, and the panic that I was feeling. Because here's the thing. Usually people ask those questions because they have some random whatever going on coming up. And I remember it was you or me. We said the dates, and there was a moment of silence, and then you said, "Are you available?"
I like to think that I have a quick wit, and I think in that moment I was just like very panicked like you were, but also like, if you say you're not, we're in trouble. Like one of those.
Right. Like I'm going to need you to confirm now that you will be there.
You don't have any conflicts that day or anything. So yeah, to this day, people still like, we're earlier in the process and people, just want like a reminder of when opening is or whatnot. And I'll still to this day say, "Oh, we're opening on June, blah, blah, blah. Are you available?" Just.
Yeah, that was. Yeah. My heart stopped a little bit in that moment. It's like, okay.
Well, and this was, of course, all in the process of us getting very quickly to Tech Week.
Yes. Also, these dates were public information.
From day one.
From day one. Looked it up. And
yes.
Rather than freaking out your production team. Yeah.
Something else I want to ask you about as, we're approaching these last couple of weeks of the rehearsal process for Spring Awakening, and our conversation is kind of taking us there. I wanted to ask you about, so there was a moment a few weeks beforehand. I had just, prior to the show, graduated from college. And I took a couple of days in the middle of the rehearsal process to go on a quick family trip. And I remember saying to you, I was like, I know we're in this process, but, give me a call if anything comes up or any concerns or any matters that, we need to discuss. And I remember you calling me while I was on that family trip which was very unexpected because usually, I mean, we're both pretty good about this. We won't call each other if one of us is out of town or whatever the case may be.
Unless it's important.
Yeah, so I remember you calling me, and we kind of just dove into a conversation in reference to you had tackled curtain call while I was
yes,
gone.
the great big curtain call
Debacle
controversy of 2018.
Yes. One of my favorite things about this particular conversation is that, like, we typically, as a company, save curtain call to the very end. I think that's how we've always done it. And that's how, I mean, we learned it. It was always something that you do at the very end. It's, you know, your very last night of tech or, you know, your last couple of days of tech, you learn curtain call and you call it a day.
Which I don't necessarily think is, like, maybe the best way to do it. I think it's a habit we picked up from high school for sure.
Sure, yeah. But this would have been early July of 2018. So it was a few weeks before the show.
Mm-hmm.
And you called me, and there were... we had kind of had a brief discussion about what we wanted curtain call to look like. And I know, from my opinion, the very end of the show is very heavy, and we just wanted to have this, like, very relaxed curtain call, let everyone come out, take a group bow from different parts of the stage, and then let everyone bow together at the end.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you would have thought we said something wonkadoo.
Mm-hmm.
It just... So, basically, I'd seen this really cool production in college, and I know, like, we both get this way, where we see a show, and we just, like, want to immediately put something we saw in it into our next project, because we thought it was so cool.
Oh, yes. Uh-huh.
And I saw the show where they didn't do a curtain call, and they did it very intentionally to kind of, like, make the audience sit with it.
Mm-hmm.
And then you kind of had to, like, leave on your own volition and be like, oh, I guess the show's over. Like, this is weird. And it really resonated with me. And I remember with Spring Awakening, I was like, we shouldn't do a curtain call. We should just lights up and let the audience sit with it and then leave. And I had gotten pushback from you and from Eric, my dad, who's also in the cast, of kind of like, well, people will be confused. Most shows have curtain calls. I think we need to have a curtain call. And I was like, okay. And I eventually gave in. But at first, it was something I was really passionate about. And we said, you know, let's just do a group bow. This show isn't really about the bows. It's not like Hello Dolly, where everyone's super happy at the end and everyone wants to, like, you know, give that round of applause for each individual performer or whatever. It's more of like this is the work we did, we're proud of it, and now we're going to leave you to interpret it.
Yes.
And you were out of town, and I remember we did a pizza party, and they already knew what the curtain call was going to be at this point. So they knew that it was going to be a group bow. During this, you know, pizza party, I thought, oh, we'll just bond. You know, I was like, you know, is there anything you guys want to talk about? And basically some of the leads of the show in front of the rest of their cast during this pizza party basically said, yeah, we don't like curtain call and we want it to change. And I was not anticipating that. That's not usually something you have happen where your cast kind of like gangs up on you, for lack of a better terminology there. So I was very caught off guard. And one of the leads, I remember they were kind of trying to, like, phrase it like, oh, I'm not worried about my bow, but I think so-and-so should be able to have their own bow. And, like, because they're more important, and they should be able to get their own moment, and we shouldn't do group bow. And it just kept going on and on and on. And, of course, the people who were never problematic, who were great to work with, were bulldozed in this conversation. They were very quiet because, you know, the people who were shit up, stuff up. I shouldn't have cursed. They were the loudest in the room, so they took over the conversation. And I remember in that moment just really feeling like I did not have control over the room. And I never had anything like that happen with Heather's or Grace, so it was very unexpected, very frustrating. I remember calling you and just being like, I don't know what to do. just feeling really down about it. I definitely think that those curtain call conversations also caused a bit of a rift in the cast because it was kind of like an us versus them type thing. Like, the leads were kind of in this one category and then everyone else was in this other category, and it just created this dynamic that wasn't what we had hoped for. Especially when you're doing a show with a smaller cast like Spring Awakening, you really hope that people are going to bond and it's going to become a tight group, and most of the time that's what happens. With this cast, it did not happen. The vibes were definitely off, and we tried a bunch of strategies to get things back on track, and I think to some extent what we did definitely contributed to it being a successful show in the end.
Absolutely.
But I think we barely got there in terms of the cast working together. That trust really wasn't established, and we were at a point where we were trying to kind of force it to be established, and it just was a constant uphill battle. So that's what I mean and we've talked about this on the podcast before, like when the cast isn't jiving together and when things aren't running smooth, you can feel it.
Absolutely.
And this show, you could feel it, like something was wrong.
Yes.
And it got to the point where rehearsals, everyone would wait in their cars until the very last minute. So you and I would be in the building chatting, and it would be 1 minute till rehearsal and everyone would get out of their cars, but everyone would sit in their individual cars until rehearsal started because no one really wanted to be around each other. They all wanted to do the show, but no one was really friends. It was bad. And that was definitely, I think there was a good amount that was not in our control in that situation. But, for people who are listening who are like, well, why do we do all these character questions? Why do we do all these games and stuff? This is partially why. And it's because if you start from day one doing those things, it really helps show that everyone's on the same level.
Absolutely.
And when you are in a quote-unquote lead role, leadership does not come naturally to everyone.
No.
And when you're in a lead role, inherently, some people are going to look up to you.
Absolutely.
And there are certain people that they just totally thrive in that position. And there are other people that aren't really able to do that leadership aspect of being a lead and leading a show. And I think that this was one of those times where it just, the way that all the pieces fit together, those people, talent-wise, were great for those parts.
Absolutely.
But they weren't quite ready for the cast dynamics aspect of it. They weren't ready for that type of responsibility.
Yeah, I mean, we've had that conversation a lot over the years of being a lead is not just coming in and just, hitting your part out of the park, and doing everything, hitting all those right beats and singing all the right notes. There's so much more that goes into it, and there is this expectation that you're going to be someone that that can encourage the cast to want to put on a really solid production. And you can tell when a lead is not in that mindset, or that's not something that they're engaged with. And it causes ripples throughout the entire cast, and you can see that, and you can see the difference in that. And I agree. I think this process was kind of our first real experience with that. But again, I agree with you. I don't think it per se messes up anything with the talent. It was a very talented group of people. And it was a really, really strong show from that standpoint. But there really is a lot that goes into being a lead that is beyond just coming in and playing this lead role.
The show wasn't, the process wasn't as special to me as some of these other shows, as it definitely could have been. And it makes all the difference. And we've had situations since then that we'll talk about when we get there. But you can tell when you have a lead that it gives this air of, I'm kind of superior to the ensemble. And I'm not saying that's necessarily what happened with this show. I think it was a little bit of that, but I think it was a lot of, like, just being naive and being focused on themselves in that moment.
I can probably also assume a lot of it was just their expectations and what they were anticipating was going to be the case, which at the same time, I mean, you're welcome to make that argument, but at the end of the day, you know, the person who's directing the show or the person who's creating or designing this piece of art, that ultimate decision is up to them, and they're doing things from a strategic standpoint and from a creative standpoint. And you're welcome to voice your opinion on it, but at the end of the day, you know, that decision comes down to you as the director to make.
Well, and a good ensemble can make a show.
Oh, absolutely. Mm-hmm.
And this is, I guess, me addressing all people who have played leads or will play leads in the future in this moment. But you are no better or worse than the people around you when you are doing theater.
Absolutely.
And when you are in a show, the ensemble around you, the people around you, are there to make you look good.
Absolutely.
So if you have the audacity to go into that situation and treat them like garbage, I'm sorry, you're on my shit list. Daryl, you can bleep that out. But that is the easiest way to have me not root for you anymore when you come out to audition. If you treat the other people in the cast of the show that are trying to make you shine, if you treat them like garbage, I'm not going to be your buddy anymore.
Right.
And I think that's so important because everything is about being a team. Yes, some roles have more solos than others, and there's no doubt about that. Some roles get more stage time, no doubt about that. Sometimes there are some people who are able to sing those songs in a more powerful way than others, and we base that off of auditions and all those things. But yeah, we're really you're really surrounded by a team of people that are making you look great and trying to set you up for success. So you owe it to them to be a team player. And I think this is a perfect example of that show could have been something special to more people if they would have done that. And like I said, these people were really young when we worked with them. And I think there were a lot of circumstances that we don't even know about that went into some of the attitudes that happened here. But that's why we implement the things we do now, is we know the importance of it, and we know how bad it can get if we don't get ahead of it.
Sure.
And sometimes it still happens. Like, it happened recently. We're not going to name drop the show. We'll talk about it later, but it happened recently. And it wasn't in our control. But just, keep in mind, when you're in that position, you actually have a lot of control over the vibe of the process.
Absolutely.
You really do. And it's a big responsibility. And, you get to decide what energy you're going to bring into rehearsals.
Exactly.
And if you come in and you want to be there and you're working hard and you're building people up, you're telling people hey, thanks for grabbing my prop and thanks for helping me with this quick change. I really appreciate it. Treat the people around you with respect and build them up. It makes all the difference. Literally all the difference. So it was tough. We had some leads in this show that didn't have the vibe, and it definitely created some negativity, and I think that was very telling by everyone waiting in their cars. They just didn't even want to talk to each other. And it still makes me sad to think about that, just because I wish there was something else we could have done to fix it. We tried to do team bonding talks. So we had started those. We called them come to Jesus moments. We would all sit in a little circle and like talk about our feelings and stuff. And we really, really did try. We tried a number game where everyone would stand in a circle and like close their eyes and would say the, like they would count up. And then if they said the same number at the same time, they'd have to start over. Which is one of my favorite bonding games. I really love that one. But I think by the end we had made some progress, and I hope that the people in the cast who did come in kind of with that negative mindset, I hope they've been able to like grow from that and recognize that maybe there are some things that they could have done to help change the environment.
Sure. Yeah, and I mean, I think about, how much I've changed over the last several years. I know you've changed a lot over the last several years.
Mm-hmm.
I think we were tackling very heavy subject matter.
Yep.
With a really diverse group of performers with a wide variety of backgrounds and different experiences in life. And I think everyone coming together, I think the energies and where everybody was at that time just didn't ultimately lend itself to being a constructive group there at the end from that standpoint as you described. But I think the talent and the commitment to getting the material out at the end of the day was inspiring from my point of view. I know there was so much going on and there was so much happening that, like, at the end of the day, the fact that we were able to tell the story and to tell it authentically and genuinely still inspires me to this day.
Oh, yeah.
Given all of those circumstances. And I'm still very proud of that mindset of, we were able to keep things going and we still were able to make that show happen.
100%. And I think now that I've gotten older, so at the time, the leads that I was referring to, they were really close to my age, if not the same age as me. And there's that kind of weird dynamic there. But if I were doing a show now and one of the leads was a 19-year-old and they were having some of those issues, I would just pull them aside and be like, hey, do you realize you're giving off this vibe to people? Because some people don't even know that they're doing it. And I think part of that comes with like more experience, but also now that I'm older, I recognize that they can't change unless they know they're doing it. And I do take responsibility for some of that because I think it could have made a difference if I had pulled them aside and been like, hey, do you know that what you're saying implies such and such, or implies that, you think you're actually a better performer than this person, and like their feelings are hurt by that. Yeah. So now that I know that, I would definitely do it differently. And I think, we've worked with some older performers who have kind of given that vibe. And usually, I mean, if they've done a lot of theater, we simply just don't cast them again. Like that's what happens. But especially with these younger performers who are kind of like new to it and got a lead role and are in their heads about it a little bit, I think it's important to have those conversations if they're applicable, because if they're able to take that and actually listen, they'll be unstoppable.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. 100%. Yeah, like I said, I think it was a really big learning opportunity for us. And as we've grown, I think we've discovered that there are other ways to handle those conversations that are constructive and beneficial for the actors at the end of the day, which is something that I think we pride ourselves on, is being able to have those difficult conversations and help people give the best that they can.
Definitely. And if we have a difficult conversation and they take nothing from it or they get defensive, at least we know we've done our job. Exactly. And I feel like in that regard, we did not fully do our job, but we were also young, and we also didn't know how to handle it. And now we have, the gift of perspective that we didn't have at the time. So I think that's a big thing. And, at first I was just kind of like, even in this discussion, just kind of heated of like, why would someone act that way? But the more you think about it, the more you unpack it, you realize it's often not as malicious as it seems.
Right.
And there are a lot of people who don't realize the impact that their words have until someone calls them out on it.
Yeah. 100%. 100%. I had a couple of lighthearted things
from
this process.
Me too.
The rehearsal process. I'm sure we probably have a similar list, so I'd love to just roll through them with you.
Yeah, let's do it.
So you talked about in your comments there about one of the things that I know I'm very passionate about is when I see a lot of professional theater. I know you see a lot of professional theater. It's one of those things that inspires me, and it like gives me an opportunity. It's like an emotional outlet for me, or like a stress relief kind of outlet for me. But I also have this big habit of seeing things done on stage that I'm like, I want to try and recreate that. I want to try and give audiences in our community a similar experience to what I felt seeing professionally done. And this show in particular, so I mentioned that trip that I was on at the beginning of July, and that trip was it was a New York City trip, and I went up to see a couple of shows for a graduation present. And one of those shows was Harry Potter and the Cursed Child. It was brand new, had just opened, and we were doing this whole campaign about keeping the secrets. And of course, I could not keep any of the secrets. I wanted to come back and tell everybody everything that I had seen, because it was the most stunning stage show I'd ever seen in my life. But without giving anything away for anyone who hasn't seen the show, they do this thing on Broadway with blacklight. That essentially there's an effect where, you know, all of the walls are coated in writing. And with blacklight, at one point in the show, you get to see all of this writing on the walls. And I thought it was the most incredible thing I had ever seen. And, like, you don't know until it happens that it's happening. And I just swore to myself, I was like, I'm going to find a way to incorporate this into Spring Awakening. You know, because what does this show need? You know, blacklight and, you know, some fun paint. So
sure.
There's a moment in the show where you find out that Mort's has failed. And I remember we were using a similar, the set was identical to, very close to identical to our Heather set. Yeah. Same platforms, same just boxes.
Like reconfigured a little bit.
And I remember us writing on the boxes, failed. And we used blacklight to try and reveal the failed. And it was never quite as good of a... The concept in theory was great, but the execution was not what we could do in a professional, you know, similar to what they could do professionally. And I kind of came to terms with that, but it still made it into the show. And it's still one of those things that, you know, I think about from that experience of like, okay, you know what? We're doing this really artsy show. We're doing the show that is, you know, it's very much so a product of your mind and my mind, and like taking the opportunity to try out something new was super exciting. And fortunately you were like, you want to try it? Let's do it. We have space in the show. It makes sense. Let's give it a try. And like I said, didn't quite go as well as I was hoping, but
we
it
tried
was worth
things,
exactly.
You know?
It was worth a try.
Yeah, we don't often play it safe, which I do like about our working relationship, especially is like we bounce crazy ideas off each other, and sometimes one of us is like, yeah, that's not gonna happen, and sometimes it works. And that was definitely one of those kind of like fun moments in time for us. The one of the stories I have, again, this was like a cast thing of just the cast turned against me. Wigs.
Oh, yes. Oh, the wigs.
So, a very big part of the original Spring Awakening production was the hair. In particular, the hair with the guys. They all had crazy hair. And part of the rationale was they were in these uniforms, and the only way they could really, like, express themselves was through their hair. So I wanted them to have crazy hair, and I wasn't going to ask them to cut it or style it weird. I was just going to put some of them in wigs, and I wanted them to all have, like, a unique look. Because, again, when they're all wearing the same costume, it's actually hard for the audience to tell who is who. Unless there's, like, a distinguishing factor about them. So we ended up, like... I got wigs for all of them, like, with their input. We were practicing with them, and then the cast decided, we don't want to do it. We're not going to wear wigs anymore. And, again, this was a point in time where every dollar for this company was coming out of my account and on my credit cards. Like, the company did not have its own bank account at this time. Wigs were expensive. We'd already used the wigs for like 3 weeks. I couldn't return them.
Yes.
So yeah, one of the leads was like, well, my dad said we wouldn't have long hair at this period of time because of lice, so I shouldn't have to wear my wig.
Do you remember what I said to you after you told me that comment? Because that just reminded me.
No, tell me again. Take me back.
You told me that that was the information that was shared, and my response was, well, these characters, the show's based in 1899. These characters, whenever they're going into their inner monologues, pull microphones out of their costumes.
They sure do.
The historical accuracy is very blurry in this show. So, I mean, the lice argument might be one to make. However, they're using microphones.
And I'll be completely honest here about my mistakes, because this is part of what this podcast is, what we learn from. All of the guys ended up basically not having wigs except one, and this was a young male who is transgender, and they were great to work with, and they were like, yeah, I'll wear the wig. And I really liked having someone wear a blonde wig in the show. I thought it was great. What I didn't realize is I had inadvertently put them in a position where they were the only male in the cast wearing a wig. And that was, I just messed up. I shouldn't have done that, because it made them feel different, like separate from the rest of the guys in the cast. And they were already going through, some big emotions because they were young. They were figuring out, like, their identity. They had just kind of figured out, like, what their identity is, and now they're in this show where they want to be accepted, and I had put them in a position where they were different, quote unquote different from the other guys. So I definitely regret that one. I should have handled that with more care. At the time, I wasn't able to read between the lines when they kind of, like, came up to me and said, hey, do I really have to wear this wig? At that time, I was so frustrated about the wigs. I was like, yes, you have to wear the freaking wig, because they were honestly the only one who was, like, willing to actually listen, because everyone else was just, like, flat out, no, I'm not wearing it anymore. And I had kind of taken advantage of the fact that they were willing to listen to me and that were receptive of that. And I didn't realize that what they were actually kind of telling me was, like, hey, now I'm kind of, like, separate from the rest of the guys. So, yeah, I feel for them in that moment, and, like, definitely with some more perspective, I've realized, like, I should have and could have handled that better. Yeah. Yeah.
It's good. It's something, you mentioned with this podcast, having this opportunity to kind of look back on these shows, it is a learning opportunity for us. And it's recognizing that, we didn't know everything going into this. And it's, in some cases, it's just been learning as we go. And, I respect the fact and appreciate the fact that you notice those things and you're willing to share and present those things as things that you've learned throughout this process. So,
we could do this and, talk about all the mistakes that everyone else makes and how they're funny, but I don't think that's truly fair unless we talk about the ones we make too.
Oh, absolutely.
So, yeah, that was definitely one of those moments where it wasn't my finest moment, but I've learned a lot from it, and I definitely, like, it gave me tools on how to handle it in the future if that were to come up again. Yeah.
I had, like, 2 other things from our rehearsing process. Okay. The first one being, we talked a little bit about the trees. We talked a lot about the trees in our last episode. Trees. Something else that I really loved about this show, just in general, were the transitions. And something I thought about while thinking back on this process was the use of the chalkboard.
Oh, yes.
Yes. So we had a chalkboard that we used on stage. It was integral to the classroom scenes. It was very important. But we also used it as a way to kind of delineate time at the top of the show.
Yep.
And I remember just being in the rehearsal space and having that chalkboard. Essentially at the top of the show, it said the dates, the date of the show on it. And then at the beginning of the show, it was spun around and then placed for the classroom. It was kind of left there, and it was like a really beautiful way of, like, opening up the story to the outside world. So I really loved that moment. We also used a lot of candles and, like, other fun lighting
Yeah.
For the show. And like we'll talk about it when we get to the actual run of the show, kind of those things that we were really, really proud of. But like the transitions and like working through using those light tricks, flashlights, different things. They were really, really powerful moments that worked really well. So one thing I will say that I really liked about this cast is that, and this is pretty common with a lot of our casts, but this one in particular, we tried everything. And nothing was off limits as far as trying new things from a technology standpoint, or from a staging and design standpoint. And they just kind of went along with it. And that was really, really good. And it was a good learning opportunity for us to see what would work and what would fit kind of our vision.
Yeah. And another, like, as you're saying that, I'm just remembering this. We had someone who I kind of grown up with who was cast as one of the girls in the show. And she, you know, came from a pretty conservative, like, background, upbringing, in terms of, like, you know, pretty religious household, and was a little bit sheltered from certain things, and now she was in Spring Awakening, and that was kind of a big deal. And I remember she would pull us aside and ask us some really great character questions, trying to figure out, you know, what her motivation was. And there was this one scene that I'm still really proud of, where the kids stand across the stage and are passing the note.
Oh, yes.
From Melchior, who's the main guy, to Venla, who's the main girl. And in this note passing moment, because we were really experimenting with transitions.
Oh, absolutely.
With this show, and I will say, I think we've gotten quite good at making some creative transitions at this point.
Absolutely.
Rent is a beautiful example of that, which we'll get to, but we did some great transitions in that show. But I love a good transition where you can use people and furniture and set pieces and create movement out of them to the point where you don't have to do blackout. Love that. That's the best thing ever. So we had basically created this scene that served as a transition where the kids passed the note across the stage to Venla. And what the intention was is to kind of show how kids would communicate with each other at that time. That was all they had, and they likely would have passed notes to each other and found a way. But as it's traveling across the stage, one of the really cool things that this character does, that this girl was doing that I mentioned, she throws the note on the ground rather than continuing to pass the note. And I remember having so many conversations with her, because she was just like, why would I throw it on the ground? That's horrible. And I was like, but think about it, though. Think about where your character is at. Think about, you know, why do people make mistakes? Like, why do people do the things they do? Why do people act in a selfish way? We had some really amazing character conversations about why she threw that note. And by the time that scene got on stage, when she did that, that was a moment. And I just loved that. And that was a moment that character normally doesn't get, but it had added so much context to the world and the story. And our music directors at the time wanted to put music over it, and I was like, no, I want this absolutely silent, except for the characters. And they were like fighting me on it, and I was like, no, this is about them. And it turned into this thing I'm very proud of. And I'd almost forgotten about it, so I'm glad that I thought of it. But yeah, she really did some amazing character work with that, and inspired me to, you know, continue asking these character questions about moments that maybe aren't even, you don't even see on stage, but that happen behind the scenes and are still so significant to the story. And the cast knowing their characters and being sure of their characters' motivations makes all the difference in any show.
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah, those transitions, I just think about them in my mind, and they were beautiful. They made that show. They made that show. Between the crazy tree choreography mixed with the chalkboard, mixed with just, it made everyone feel like an integral part of that story.
The show was stunning. Like, I will say. And thinking back on it, too, with, like, the issues we had with, like, kind of the attitudes that I had alluded to.
Yeah.
Now that I'm thinking about it more, it's kind of like, it's a show about angst.
Exactly. Mm-hmm.
And that cast was going through some angst.
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, sometimes that happens.
Yeah, for sure.
And I do think for some of those people, it actually made their performances better because they were really, like, feeling those emotions. And like I said, you know, unfortunately, some people will get, like, just the result of that and don't get the context.
Exactly.
And that's kind of how I felt, is I was just like, why is this targeted at me in this production? But it's really important to remember that there's, you know, a lot more to everyone's story than what we're getting.
Yes.
And I'm glad that for those people, they were kind of able to express that in a healthy way through the show.
Sure. Absolutely.
And I do think it made for a really interesting production at the end of the day that we're both super proud of.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
So that's not me saying, hey, you know, be a jerk at rehearsals, but I do think, especially when you're working with young adults, there's a lot of just big emotions, and it was a really heavy subject matter, and I think we were in our feelings a little bit.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that's a very fair statement to make.
Yeah.
For sure.
I have one more anecdote to add. Do you have anything else?
I did. I had, like, one other thing. This was the first production where we had an alternate.
Yes.
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 Which, in hindsight, thinking about it now, probably would have been, or probably was a really good decision for us as a learning opportunity.
For sure.
Considering some of the circumstances we've dealt with over the last couple of years with certain shows.
Yep.
But yeah, so essentially one of our performers was only able to do 5 out of the 6 shows, and we made the decision to proceed with them in the cast and invite or allow someone else to play that role for the 6th performance.
Yeah.
Which made the rehearsal process really unique. We got to run a lot of those numbers more than once. We got to see 2 different interpretations of the same character. And it just made for a really, like, from a directing standpoint, I don't know, I think we both felt very similar in this mindset, but, like, it was a learning opportunity of how we can support people discovering a character in 2 very different ways.
Oh, yeah.
And how that impacts not only the person playing the part, but everyone else in the cast.
That was a very cool moment to see the alternate go on for that last performance because it was a different show in a lot of ways.
Sure.
So that was really cool, actually, to get that experience of seeing both performers and the interpretation of the material. And it just goes to show you, like we've talked about with casting before, is, you know, you can go down the street to a company that's doing the exact same show and audition with the same song and get a completely different role because that's just how casting works. And that was definitely one of those moments where those 2 performers both played that role very well.
They did.
Very, very well.
Absolutely.
My other fun anecdote, as we're journeying to the theater, which our next episode will be all about the tech and performances of this show, but I broke my toe at work the day of move-in day. So
I forgot about that.
I was at this time I was working at a diner and I was waiting tables and we were cleaning up and I was like being silly and I couldn't really reach this light that like was above the kitchen window, and normally I would climb on the counter and hit it, but I was like, I'm just gonna jump up and hit it, and I jumped up, hit it, and landed, and like the toe next to my big toe like bent wrong. And I remember you have that moment after you do something stupid like that where you're like, I messed up. And I remember I went to the bathroom, I excused myself for a moment, and I immediately took off my sneaker. And I was just like, how bad is this? And I didn't see anything yet, but as I was walking around, I could feel it, like something was wrong.
Yeah.
And we had the U-Haul, and we went to the rehearsal space, and we were loading at the rehearsal space and then going to the venue. And I was there, and I was moving stuff, and every time I would pick something up, you don't realize you kind of adjust your toes when you're lifting things. And every time I would lift things, I would feel my toe move, and it hurt so bad. Like, one of the worst pains I've experienced. It hurt so bad. and I've had ingrown toenails, and if you've had an ingrown toenail, it's kind of like when something hits your ingrown toenail. It was like that kind of like sharp, like stabby pain.
Mm-hmm.
And Dakota was getting kind of annoyed with me. He was like, okay, if you're going to keep like, acting like this, I just need you to step aside and we're going to keep moving stuff. And I was like, okay, that's fair.
Yeah.
So I stepped aside and I kept moving stuff, and I was wearing like these like almost like slipper things at the rehearsal, trying to like keep my toe like wrapped up and stuff. And I had spent the night at his house that night, and I remember he was like, Miranda, there's no way it's broken. If it was broken, you would be acting way worse. You'd be crying and stuff. Like, there's just no way. And I was like, okay, yeah, you're probably right. And we went to sleep, and when I woke up, that sucker was purple.
Oh.
It was black and blue, and I was just like, and then I'm Googling. I'm like, what do they do for a broken toe? Like, is there any point in me even, like, going to the hospital? Like, do they actually do anything? And basically all they do is, like, position it in such a way where it can heal properly.
Yeah.
So I just wrapped it up really good. I took a picture of it first, and then I wrapped it up really good. But to this day, there's, like, a little, like, bump on my toe where the bone kind of just, like, didn't quite grow back the way it was supposed to. And that was the very beginning of Spring Awakening tech for me, was that toe experience.
I think we have a title for this episode. It's The Summer of Purple Toes.
That's so good.
Yeah.
I'm going to use that. The Summer of Purple Toes. Just one.
Just
Should I do
purple
the
toe.
Summer of Purple Toe?
Yes.
But,
oh, goodness.
yeah.
Yeah. It was quite the rehearsal process. I look forward to us talking about our tech week and
Oh, me too.
our 2 weekends of performances.
What a blur.
What a
I tell you what.
blur.
But we've got a lot to unpack. I think this was kind of, I'll speak for myself, hopefully you feel the same, cathartic, getting to talk about, one of our show experiences that, like, the process wasn't fully what we wanted it to be, but we still, like, learned a lot from it. And like I said, I'm still so proud of how the show turned out. And one day I hope we get to revisit this one, because it's such a great show. And some of the things we were able to do with this were really, really neat.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Cool.
All right.
Well,
We'll call it there, and we'll be back next time.
we sure will. Alrighty. See ya.
Bye.